With Russia's latest attack on Dnipro being debated as to what type of weapon was actually used, we'll now try to determine whether this war in Ukraine is in fact entering a new dangerous phase. And joining me here to discuss is Aaron Korewa, director at the Atlantic Council's Warsaw Office. Hello, Aaron. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Now, it seems that speculation is rife as to what type of missile. Putin says this is a non-nuclear Oreshnik hypersonic ballistic missile. The open source intelligence community, along with Ukraine's Air Force, says that it was a RS-26 Rubezh ICBM capable of carrying nuclear warheads, and the U.S. has said that it's likely was not an ICBM. In either case, what do you think, if any, the significance of this strike in Dnipro was? And do you believe that this is an escalation?
Well, I mean, obviously, this is some sort of Russia's attempt to respond probably to the decisions that were recently made that Ukraine can use the long-range ATACMS and maybe the British Storm Shadows probably into Russian territory. Now, I still don't really know if it's only about Kursk or in general, and the Russians felt they had a need of responding in some way. For what I've seen of some of the footage of this missiles hitting down, it's basically in Dnipro. It looks like there is a lot of craters, meaning that there's a lot of projectiles, but they're not very big or deep, meaning so it's not really the type of power and explosion that you normally associate with these kinds of weapons. A lot of people are saying, oh, this is capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Yeah, sure. Russia's fired things into Ukraine that are capable of carrying nuclear weapons ever since the beginning of the war. So that's not really that big of a deal.
Right.
I think that...
But if it was an ICBM, and looking at that footage, I thought it was pretty fascinating because ICBMs generally have multiple warheads, and this indeed looked like multiple probably inert warheads. They didn't cause that much damage.
Yeah, exactly. So multiple, I mean, it could be, look, here the thing about Russia is that, when Putin says, oh, look at our wonder weapon, the hypersonic, this, that, the other thing. I mean, often there's a lot of like MacGyverism, and often they would take like one old model and they would put something else on it, and then they would say this is completely new when it in fact isn't, right? So, but bottom line, I mean, I don't think this definitely is not a sign of strength, right? Because potentially this is a violation of certain treaties that Russia has signed. You do not fire a giant thing like this that can violate treaties if you are in a strong position. Russia is, despite what their propaganda is saying, is not in a very good place in this war. The losses are massive, not just in men but also in equipment. The losses are greater than what Russia can supplant in production and also from the stocks that are taking out. Russian inflation is in double digits. I mean, the growth numbers and stuff like that from Russia, you can't believe in that because that's pure propaganda. I mean, the Russian economy has been much more severely hit by the sanctions than they would like to admit. But I mean, inflation is super high. The Russian construction companies are basically out of money at this point. Russian planes, like civilian planes, don't have spare parts. What they really want to do is to scare us, to freak us out, so that we'll think, oh, it's time to end the war quickly, or else there's going to be something with nukes and what have you. This is the same ploy that has been going on from the beginning, because as long as the West stays the course and continues to supply Ukraine, obviously in a higher, better pace than they're doing now, Russia is in really big trouble with this.
Well, and shouldn't we be really underwhelmed right now? If this is the response based on the nuclear saber rattling that was just done, the revision of the nuclear doctrine to actually use nuclear weapons in cases exactly as the granting of the ATACMS or the Storm Shadows to use on Russian territory, if this is the top of their response, shouldn't we be underwhelmed?
Yes, absolutely. And we should also stop falling into this trap of, starting to be freaked out and scared over like some new thing or whatever. I mean, this is, again, we've seen this movie before on many occasions. There is a lot of reasons why the probability for Russia using nuclear weapons in Ukraine is very low, simply because it doesn't yield much military value. I mean, this current strike, again, not much damage done in a civilian area. On the battlefield, there's really not much use. These things are hard to aim with anyway. If the Russians use a nuclear weapon on the battlefield in Ukraine, sure, they're going to kill a lot of Ukrainian soldiers in that particular area, yes. But then what? I mean, are they going to send in their troops to try to take that territory with the fallout without protective gear? Not likely. Also, it's very clear that it's been shown since before that China, which is crucial for their support for Russia in terms of trying to circumvent the sanctions, sending them a lot of material that they use for dual usage and stuff like that. The Chinese have been very clear with the Russians that they do not want to see the use of nuclear weapons, simply because China does not want to normalize the use of nukes, because whereas China does have nuclear weapons, their arsenal is very small. It's not in parity with the United States or Russia. So if China now suddenly feels the need that they have to get into a nuclear arms race, particularly considering that the Chinese economy is not in good shape either, that's not something they want. And besides, there are a lot of countries near China that are not nuclear powers but could become nuclear powers very quickly. That includes Japan, South Korea, Australia, potentially even Taiwan. So this is something the Chinese really do not want to see.
I'd like to ask you about the $60 billion supplemental. The United States still has to make good on $7 billion worth of weapons from U.S. stockpiles, which are reportedly diminished. And it's questionable as to whether that will make it out and be delivered to Ukraine by January 20th. Is it likely that this $7 billion worth of weapons, $9 billion in total, could be lost out of this $60 billion supplemental?
Well, I hope not. I mean, there's no real reason for why that should not be able to be delivered. A lot of things that we've seen, delays are simply a matter of like bureaucratic red tape and stuff that it kind of shows that we have not really gotten into warfighting. A perfect example is that something that did not get as much attention as the permission for Ukraine to fire the ATACMS is that we also decided to deliver anti-personnel mines to Ukraine. Okay, why now? I mean, anti-personnel mines are perfect for stopping mass infantry assaults. This should have been done a long time ago. But again, there's complaints that, unexploded mines, they can be dangerous. Sure, they can. But for Ukrainians, something that's far more dangerous than unexploded mines is unexploded Russian soldiers.
Well, with that, we've run out of time. Aaron Korewa from the Atlantic Council's Warsaw Office, Director, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Appreciate it. And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned because On the Record with Adam Yasser is coming up next. See you next time.